When no one showed up for Thanksgiving, I thought I was finally used to being forgotten. But when my grandma arrived hours later, trembling with a secret she'd kept for 40 years, I realized my family's silence wasn't neglect. It was guilt. They always said Thanksgiving was about family, about warmth, laughter, forgiveness. But that year, my phone stayed silent. No texts, no calls, just a calendar reminder blinking. Thanksgiving dinner, 5 p.m. I made dinner for one, out of habit. The turkey was smaller this time, the way my mother used to say, only make what you can finish. Outside, the street was alive with headlights and laughter. Inside, my apartment echoed with the sound of my own fork scraping an empty plate. And then the knock. Soft. Hesitant. When I opened the door, there she was, my grandmother, Evelyn, clutching an old leather box and looking like she'd aged 10 years overnight. What she told me that night didn't just change my family, it exposed it. Because sometimes the people who forget you do it on purpose. And sometimes the truth doesn't bring peace. It brings reckoning. The first snow of November had just begun to fall when Irene Foster realized no one was coming home. The group chat her family used every holiday, Foster Family Thanksgiving, had gone silent a week ago. The last message was from her mother, Linda, politely announcing that this year's dinner would be a smaller gathering. Smaller. Meaning, without her. She sat in her Chicago apartment, a plate of untouched takeout on the counter, the smell of roasted turkey coming faintly through a neighbor's open door. For years, she'd pretended it didn't matter. Her parents, her brother, her sister, they had their own lives, their own traditions. But this year, something inside her cracked. Because Grandma Evelyn had called. Sweetheart, her grandmother's trembling voice had said over the phone. Don't spend Thanksgiving alone. Please, come home. I need to see you. There was something in that voice, something fragile, urgent, that pushed Irene into her car at dawn, driving through snow-dusted highways toward the small town of Meadow Ridge, where she'd grown up. When she pulled into the driveway of her grandmother's old farmhouse, it was like stepping back into a memory. Chipped paint, the faint smell of cinnamon from the window, the worn porch swing that used to creak under her childhood weight. The only light came from the kitchen window. Grandma Evelyn opened the door before Irene could knock. Her face was thinner, her gray hair pulled into a loose bun, but her eyes, sharp, ocean blue, still carried that quiet mischief. Irene. The way she said it, with warmth and sorrow all tangled together, made Irene's throat tighten. Hi, Grandma, she whispered, stepping into the light. Evelyn wrapped her in an embrace that felt both comforting and brittle. I thought you wouldn't come. I almost didn't. Good thing you did. The kitchen looked exactly as it always had. Lace curtains, antique clock ticking steadily, the table set for two. On the counter sat a pie, half-baked, the smell of pumpkin and cloves filling the air. You baked? Irene asked, surprised. Evelyn smiled faintly. Old habits die hard. Sit, sweetheart. We'll talk after we eat. The meal was simple. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, a store-bought cranberry jar that Evelyn had transferred to a glass bowl to look homemade. But it was peaceful. No fake smiles, no loud voices, no family tension. Just them. Halfway through, Evelyn put down her fork and sighed. You're probably wondering why I asked you to come. Irene nodded slowly. I was. You sounded serious. Her grandmother's hands trembled slightly as she reached for a folded envelope sitting beside the salt shaker. Because there are things you don't know, Irene. About our family. About why they treat you the way they do. What do you mean? Evelyn looked at her for a long moment, her voice quiet but steady. They lied to you. For years. The clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Irene's mind began racing through possibilities, inheritance, infidelity, family feuds, all the quiet rumors that had floated through the years. What kind of lies? She finally asked. Her grandmother's eyes watered. The kind that changes everything. Evelyn slid the envelope across the table. I wrote this years ago. I never sent it because your father begged me not to. But I can't keep quiet anymore. Irene's fingers brushed the paper. Old. Yellowed at the edges. Inside were several handwritten pages. Her grandmother gestured softly. "Read it later. Upstairs, in your old room." "Grandma, you're scaring me." Evelyn gave a sad smile. "Some truths should scare you, darling. But they'll also free you." Upstairs, Irene's childhood bedroom felt frozen in time. The faded wallpaper, her old trophies, the Polaroids still pinned above the desk. She sat on the bed, unfolded the letter, and began to read. "My dearest Irene, if you're reading this, it means I no longer have the strength to stay silent. There's something your parents never wanted you to know, about where you come from and why they've treated you differently all these years. You were not their first child. You were their second, but your brother, the one you know as Matthew, is not who you think he is. Matthew was adopted. You were the biological one. But after an accident and a decision your mother made to protect her reputation, they switched the truth. You grew up believing you were the afterthought. But you were never the mistake. You were the one they tried to erase." Irene froze. Her hands shook as she stared at the words. They switched the truth. Her mind flashed through memories, her parents' favoritism, her mother's dismissive comments, her father's cold distance. It had always felt off, as if she didn't belong to them. But this was betrayal on a level she couldn't name. She kept reading, her heartbeat loud in her ears. "I tried to stop them, Irene. I wanted to tell you when you turn 18, but your father threatened to cut me off. He said family secrets were better buried. But secrets, my dear, don't stay buried forever. I'm leaving you something, proof. Look in the old cedar box in my closet." Irene didn't think. She ran. Down the hall, into her grandmother's bedroom, threw open the closet door. Behind the coats and quilts, there it was, a worn cedar box, the one she remembered as a child, the one she'd been told never to open. She lifted the lid. Inside were photographs, old hospital records, birth certificates, newspaper clippings. Her own birth certificate, Irene Foster, daughter of Daniel and Linda Foster. But next to it another one, Matthew Foster, son of Evelyn Grace Rowan. Her grandmother's name. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Her brother wasn't her parents' son. He was her grandmother's. A child born in secrecy, raised as their own. Her grandmother had given up her child to her daughter and son-in-law, a family cover-up. And Irene had been the collateral damage. The floorboards creaked. "I thought you might come looking," a voice said from the doorway. Irene turned sharply. Her father stood there, tall, his gray hair combed perfectly, face unreadable. "Dad." He didn't look surprised. He looked tired. "I told her not to tell you. So it's true?" He exhaled heavily, stepping into the room. "Some things are better left alone, Irene." "Better left alone?" Her voice cracked. "You let me believe I wasn't good enough. You let me think you hated me." "It wasn't hate," he said coldly. "It was necessary." "Necessary for what? Protecting your image? Your perfect little family?" His jaw clenched. "You don't understand what your grandmother did. She lied first." From the doorway, Evelyn's voice, soft but sharp. "I lied to protect you all. You twisted it to protect yourselves." Daniel turned, fury flashing in his eyes. "You ruined us once, Mother. Don't start again." "I ruined you," she said, trembling. "I gave you everything. I gave you a child. You took my son and raised him as yours. And when your real daughter came along, you treated her like a stranger." Irene's world tilted. Her voice came out barely a whisper. "You took Matthew from her?" Daniel's silence was enough. Evelyn's tears spilled freely now. "He was my baby, Irene. I was 17. The town would have destroyed me. Your mother insisted. She wanted a son. She said it was the only way to save the family name." Irene stepped back, the air gone from her lungs. The truth wasn't just betrayal. It was a transaction. Her entire existence, erased to preserve a lie. For the next hour, the house was silent except for the storm outside. Irene sat in her old room, staring at the evidence on her lap, her father's footsteps echoing down the hall as he left. Her grandmother sat beside her, frail but firm. "I wanted to tell you sooner. But your parents—" "I know. Irene whispered. They needed their secret more than they needed me. Evelyn's voice broke. I just didn't want to die without you knowing who you are. Irene looked at her, tears in her eyes. You didn't just tell me who I am. You told me who they really are. Later that night, while Evelyn slept, Irene stood by the window, staring at the snow. Her phone buzzed, a message from her sister Natalie. Heard you went to Grandma's. Hope she didn't fill your head with her stories again. Don't ruin Thanksgiving for everyone, Irene. She stared at the text for a long moment, then deleted it. Something inside her had shifted. She wasn't the quiet, overlooked daughter anymore. She was the only one holding the truth, the kind that could destroy their perfect image forever. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of them. The morning light crept through the farmhouse curtains, pale and cold. Irene hadn't slept. The documents from the cedar box still sat on the table. Birth certificates, hospital forms, a single photograph of her grandmother as a terrified 17-year-old holding a newborn wrapped in a white blanket. Her father's words echoed in her head. Some things are better left alone. And her grandmother's response. Secrets don't stay buried forever. Irene knew the truth now. But what she didn't yet understand was the weight of that last line in the letter. I'm leaving you something, proof. The cedar box was heavier than it looked. She lifted the bottom panel, and there, hidden beneath a false layer, was a small envelope marked legal documents. Inside, a deed, a will, and a notarized statement from 1987. Her heart began to race as she read. In the event of my passing, the property and full Foster estate shall revert to the legal bloodline of Evelyn Grace Rowan. It took a moment for her to register what that meant. Not her father, not her mother, not the son they'd claimed as their own. The entire estate, the family's wealth, the land, the investments, by law belonged to Evelyn's bloodline, which meant Irene, the forgotten daughter, the erased name, the quiet one they dismissed for years. She was the legal heir. Evelyn found her still holding the papers hours later. Her face was pale, her voice fragile. You found it, didn't you? Irene looked up slowly. You know what this means? Her grandmother nodded. Yes. I signed it when your grandfather died. He wanted to ensure the property stayed within my bloodline. Your father convinced me to hide it. He said it would complicate the family structure. I was too tired to fight back. Irene stared at her. He's been living off it. The house, the business, everything. All under your name. Evelyn's eyes glistened. And under yours now. By the afternoon, the weight of that knowledge became unbearable. Outside, the snow had thickened into a storm. In the distance, she saw a set of headlights, a car pulling up the long driveway. Her stomach tightened. When the door opened, her father walked in, followed by her mother, Linda, and sister, Natalie. Their expensive coats, their polished shoes, they looked entirely out of place against the cracked wood floors. Irene, Linda began softly, forcing a smile. We heard you came down here. Thought we should all talk. About what? Irene's voice was steady. Her father's eyes flickered toward the table, the open box, the spread of documents. His face darkened. You've gone too far. No, Irene said, her voice rising. You went too far when you decided to rewrite my life. Her mother stepped forward, tone falsely gentle. Sweetheart, you don't understand. Stop calling me that. Irene's words cut sharp. You lied to me. You made me believe I was less than you, less than him. Natalie rolled her eyes. God, here we go again with the victim act. Enough, Daniel barked. The room fell silent. He turned to Irene, lowering his voice. I told you before, some things should stay buried. Do you think unearthing this will fix anything? You'll ruin this family. Irene's stare didn't waver. Maybe it needs to be ruined. Grandma Evelyn shuffled in from the kitchen, leaning on her cane. Her voice was soft, but it carried like thunder. You ruined it the day you built it on lies, Daniel. Linda sighed, exasperated. Mother, please. No, Linda. Evelyn's voice cracked with grief and rage. You convinced me to hand over my child. You let me watch him grow up calling me grandma instead of mom. And when Irene was born, The first child you had by blood. You made her feel like an outsider so you could keep pretending everything was perfect. Irene's breath hitched. Wait, Matthew knows. Daniel's silence said enough. Evelyn shook her head, trembling. He doesn't. I made sure of that. He was innocent. You all were, until you turned innocence into convenience. Linda's mask slipped. We did what we had to do, Mother. You think society would have accepted a teenage pregnancy back then? We saved your reputation. You destroyed my soul, Evelyn whispered. The storm outside raged harder, the wind howling against the walls. Inside, tension hummed like static. Irene walked to the table and picked up the legal documents. You kept everything you have by hiding this. Daniel stepped closer. You don't know what you're getting into, Irene. These papers are old. They mean nothing now. They mean everything, she replied coldly. They're notarized, witnessed, and still valid under state law. Her father's composure cracked. What are you going to do? Take us to court? Humiliate your own family? Irene met his eyes, calm, resolute. I don't have to. The truth humiliates itself. It was Grandma Evelyn who broke the silence. Dinner's ready, she said softly. Everyone stared at her. I made enough for all of us. Since you came all this way, she added, her voice trembling with irony. Let's eat one last Thanksgiving together. The words settled like frost. No one dared refuse. They gathered around the table. The air was thick with unspoken resentment. Evelyn sat at the head, Irene beside her. Across from them, Daniel and Linda sat rigid, their daughter Natalie scrolling silently through her phone. The only sound was the clinking of silverware. Halfway through, Evelyn's hand trembled as she lifted her glass. Before we finish, I have something to say. Her gaze swept across the table. This might be my last Thanksgiving. I'm not getting stronger, and I won't spend what time I have left pretending this family isn't broken. I've lived with guilt for 50 years. I want to die free of it. Daniel set down his fork sharply. Mother. She raised her hand. No. You'll listen. Her voice gained strength. You all owe Irene an apology. You stole her place, her identity, her dignity. You raised her brother as mine, and you shunned her for being the only one who never lied. Irene blinked back tears. Linda's face hardened. And what would you have us do now? Undo history? Evelyn smiled sadly. No. History has already undone you. Later, after dinner, while the others bickered in hushed tones in the living room, Irene found her grandmother sitting by the fire. I don't want the house, Irene said quietly. Or the money. I just want to stop feeling like a ghost in my own family. Evelyn looked at her, eyes soft with pride. You've already done that, my dear. You faced them. Irene hesitated. But what now? They'll fight me on everything. Her grandmother's lips curved faintly. Then let them. Truth has a longer life than lies. She reached into the pocket of her sweater and pulled out a small USB drive. There's one more thing. I recorded a statement with my attorney years ago. If anything happens to me, he knows what to do. But if you want justice now, this file has everything, scanned documents, the will, and my confession. Irene's throat tightened. Why give this to me? Because you're the only one who won't use it for revenge, Evelyn said softly. You'll use it for closure. That night, Irene couldn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table, the flicker of the fireplace reflecting off the USB drive. Her phone buzzed again, a new message from Natalie. You really think anyone's going to believe Grandma's nonsense? She's old, losing it. Don't embarrass yourself. Irene didn't reply. Instead, she opened her laptop, inserted the drive, and watched a video file labeled Evelyn Rowan Confession. Her grandmother appeared on screen, years younger but unmistakably resolute. If you're seeing this, it means my silence is over. I take full responsibility for giving up my son to Daniel and Linda Foster. But I also affirm that Irene Foster is my legitimate granddaughter and the rightful heir to the Rowan estate. Any attempt to contest this is fraud. Irene exhaled shakily. It was more than a confession. It was proof. The next morning, the storm cleared. Evelyn sat at the window, pale but peaceful. "You're leaving, aren't you?" she asked softly. Irene nodded. "I need to. For now." Her grandmother smiled. "Good. Let the truth breathe." They hugged, a long, lingering embrace that said everything words couldn't. By the time Irene reached Chicago, she'd already uploaded copies of the documents and confession to a secure drive, one shared with her grandmother's attorney. She didn't plan to expose anyone yet. She just wanted to live without the shadow of their lies. But fate had other plans. 2 weeks later, Grandma Evelyn passed away in her sleep. The funeral was small. Her parents didn't make eye contact with Irene. Her brother Matthew looked confused, whispering to their mother, "Why's everyone acting weird?" Irene stayed quiet. She knew Evelyn wouldn't have wanted a scene. But after the ceremony, the lawyer approached her privately. Mrs. Rowan left instructions for a final reading of her will. It must be done at the farmhouse, with all family members present. The following weekend, they gathered one last time in the old house. The lawyer, a tall, gray-haired man, opened a folder and began reading. "I, Evelyn Grace Rowan, being of sound mind, hereby declare this my final will and testament. To my grandson Matthew Foster, I leave the family piano, the one that once filled this home with music. To my daughter Linda, I leave my jewelry collection, though I suspect she'll sell it anyway. To my son-in-law Daniel, I leave my forgiveness, though he never asked for it." A murmur went through the room. "And to my granddaughter, Irene Foster, the one who carries both my heart and my truth, I leave the remainder of my estate, including the farmhouse, all attached properties, and my savings." The lawyer looked up. "There's one more file she asked me to play." He pressed a button. Evelyn's recorded voice filled the room. "If you're hearing this, I'm gone. I wanted you all together one last time. Not for inheritance, but for truth. You built this family on silence. I'm ending it with honesty. Irene, my dear, you were always meant to carry this name with pride. Don't let them take that from you again." When the video ended, silence fell. Daniel stood, face flushed with rage. "This is manipulation. She wasn't in her right mind." The lawyer cut him off. "Everything was notarized. It's binding." Linda's voice broke. "We'll contest it." Irene finally spoke. "You can try, but you'll lose." Her calm tone, the same quiet voice they'd ignored for years, landed harder than any threat. Natalie glared. "You planned this." Irene shook her head. "No. I just stopped pretending." The family stormed out one by one, leaving Irene alone in the old living room. The fire crackled softly. On the mantel sat a photo of her grandmother, young, smiling, holding a baby wrapped in white. She picked it up, tracing the edge with her thumb. "Thank you," she whispered. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle this time, like the world exhaling. For the first time in her life, Irene didn't feel invisible. She didn't need their approval, their apologies, or their acceptance. The truth was hers now, and that was enough. A year later, the farmhouse was hers completely. She'd renovated it into a writer's retreat, a place for women to come and rebuild their stories. On the anniversary of Evelyn's passing, she placed a small plaque by the front door. "The Rowan House, for those who refuse to be silenced." As she stood in the doorway, snow falling softly on the porch, she smiled faintly. Her phone buzzed, a message from Matthew. "I found out everything. Mom and Dad finally told me. I'm sorry, Irene. Can I visit sometime?" She typed back after a pause. "You're welcome anytime. Bring honesty." Then she set the phone aside, poured a cup of tea, and looked out at the snowfall. For years, she'd been the forgotten daughter. Now, she was the voice that carried forward, the one her grandmother had trusted to end the silence. And as the firelight flickered behind her, Irene Foster finally felt what she'd been chasing all her life. Not revenge. Not justice. Peace.